All right, today we are diving deep into a theory that asks one of the most incredible questions you can imagine. What if the fundamental laws of physics and the great mystery of consciousness aren't separate things at all? What if they're actually two sides of the same coin? We're going to explore a wild new framework called CMAC that proposes exactly that, a unified picture of reality itself. So, let's get into it. Okay, so to really get what CMAC is about, we have to start with the biggest, most glaring problem in all of modern physics. On one hand, you've got Einstein's general relativity. It gives us this beautiful, sweeping vision of the universe as a smooth, predictable fabric of spacetime, where planets and galaxies follow these elegant, determined paths. But then on the other hand, you have quantum mechanics, and it tells us that at the tiniest scales, reality is this ghost-like, branching web of possibilities where absolutely nothing is certain until you look at it. Now look, on their own, both of these theories work spectacularly well. But here's the kicker. They are completely, fundamentally incompatible. One says reality is smooth and certain, the other says it's fuzzy and based on probability. This isn't just some minor disagreement. It is a giant, gaping chasm in our understanding of everything, especially when we try to look at extreme places like the Big Bang or inside a black hole. So, the question is, how on earth do you bridge that gap?
Well, this is where the CMAC framework comes in with a seriously radical idea. It says, what if there aren't two different realities? What if there's just one reality that's governed by a single, hidden mechanism? Imagine something like a universal reality dial that can literally tune the fabric of existence, sliding it from the total weirdness of the quantum world all the way to the solid, classical one we see around us every single day.
So let's break that divide down a little bit more. First, you've got general relativity. This is Einstein's masterpiece, right? It describes spacetime as this smooth, continuous sheet, and in that picture, everything that happens is determined by the geometry of that sheet. Everything follows a nice, predictable path. And then you have the quantum world. And instead of a single, solid reality, it's more like an infinite web of branching timelines. What this framework calls a multi-way structure, where every single possible outcome exists all at once. It's a world of superposition, where particles are in this fuzzy, undecided states, and their fates can be spookily linked across the universe through entanglement. Yeah, as you can probably tell, these two descriptions, they just do not play nice together. So how in the world does CMAC propose to stitch these two realities together? Well, it introduces a brand new, fundamental ingredient to the universe. This is the mechanism that's actually behind that reality dial, and this ingredient is a field called kappa. CMAC calls it the contraction field, and it's represented by the Greek letter kappa. The easiest way to think about it is like a master control knob for reality. Its value, which can go from 0 to 1, basically decides how classical, or how quantum, any given part of the universe is behaving at any moment. So when you turn that dial all the way down, kappa is close to 0, and here, reality is pure quantum weirdness. All those branching paths, all those possible histories, they all exist at the same time, and they all interfere with each other. This is the land of superposition and fuzzy probabilities. But what happens when you turn that dial up towards 1? The framework says that this whole branching, multi-way structure literally contracts. The quantum interference just fizzles out, and one single definite history gets selected out of all those infinite possibilities. And it's this process of contraction that actually gives rise to the stable, smooth space-time that we live in, the world that general relativity describes so well. Okay, so this reality dial connects quantum physics with classical physics. That's already huge, but the theory claims it does way more than that. It actually suggests that the value of kappa has changed over cosmic time, and in doing so, it describes the evolution of our entire universe. So the really crucial takeaway here is that quantum mechanics and general relativity aren't separate theories anymore. Nope, they're just two different states of one single system that's all governed by kappa. You can see the contrast right here. At low kappa, you get a ton of branching and interference, and that gives you quantum physics. At high kappa, that branching gets shut down, the interference goes away, and you get the stable geometry of general relativity. It's all a spectrum. Now, this is where things get really interesting and potentially even testable. What if kappa isn't just some smooth background number across the universe? What if the field itself could get excited? What if it could create waves? The theory actually predicts that this is exactly what happens, and it gives these ripples a name, contractionons. These would be the actual particles, the quanta of this contraction field.
I mean, finding these would be absolutely revolutionary. They might show up as weird anomalies in gravitational waves, or maybe even as a whole new fundamental force carried by these particles.
So, at this point, we have a potential new theory of physics with a new particle we could go look for. But this is where CMAC makes its most mind-bending, audacious leap. It asks, what is it that causes this contraction? What's turning the reality dial from quantum to classical? And the theory proposes a truly startling answer. Us, conscious observers. It connects this whole physical mechanism directly to the act of paying attention.
So in this framework, we are not just passive spectators watching the movie of the universe unfold. The theory suggests that consciousness isn't just some random byproduct of a finished universe. It's an active participant in forging that reality. Our very awareness is hypothesized to be a source of this contraction field, helping to make reality solid and concrete.
So how is that supposed to work? Well, the theory actually models our attention as a physical process. It proposes that our focus acts like a kind of gravity on that multi-way structure of possibilities. It pulls one specific timeline out of that sea of potential futures and stabilizes it into our coherent experience. And it's this constant act of selecting and collapsing branches that, according to CMAC, creates our subjective experience of a single, forward-moving arrow of time.
This leads us straight to the most profound and, frankly, the most spiritual implication of this entire framework. If all of this cosmic machinery is real, this dial, this field, the role of observers, it just begs this enormous question. What is all of this for?
There's this one quote from one of the theory's foundational papers that just gets right to the heart of this grand vision. It suggests that the universe isn't just a static collection of stuff, but a dynamic process, a process of becoming aware of itself.
The theory even lays out this grand architecture for how that happens. It starts with what it calls omnipotentiality, basically a state of pure infinite possibility. Then, through a process of self-selection, which is totally inseparable from awareness, certain ways of existing are chosen and made real. And this leads to a coherent reality that can then, in the end, recognize itself.
And this, right here, is the ultimate takeaway. Physics, with all its laws and particles, history, with its sequence of events, and consciousness, with its ability to be aware, they aren't separate things at all. In the CMAC view, they are all just different expressions of one single, unified process, the universe coming to know itself.
So we're left with this final, really provocative thought. What if the universe isn't a static machine that's just governed by some timeless laws? What if it's an active, dynamic process of becoming, a journey from infinite potential to a self-aware reality? Now, this is all still a developing theory, of course, but CMAC offers a deeply compelling and beautifully unified vision for how that incredible process just might actually work.